Avraham Avinu was the man that was called Ish HaIvri. Ivri means Ever HaYarden, the other side of the river. He was the man to take that big step.
And because he had the courage to see what was messed up and stand up against it and go his own way against the way the whole world was, that's what was special about him, because he was not afraid to stand up for his truth even though everybody else was messed up.
Abraham lived in terrible times when no one believed in anything and the world and civilization were morally corrupt, and Abraham managed to change that all around.
Abraham was a unique individual in that he was the first individual to recognize the oneness of God.
He basically grew up amongst idol worshippers, and he came to his own conclusion that there's got to be someone who made the world, and it can't be these idols that we made.
He had many special things about him, but the one that I could think of is that he was the first man who he believed in something, and he was willing to go against the whole world for what he believed in.
He was also a man that could take pain after being circumcised when he was 99.
Our father Abraham is the founder of the Jewish people and of Judaism, and really through that he's the founder of all monotheistic religions in the world. It's amazing that one individual could have such an influence not only on his generation but on all generations that have come after him as well. Abraham, Maimonides teaches us, he was 52 years old when he came to the full realization of his faith in one God, the universal God. And his uniqueness is that he taught about God through his behavior towards other human beings. He didn't preach God, he preached kindness, compassion, charity, right and wrong. And through those methods, he was able to influence people to realize that there is a God in the world. The famous idea that the Midrash says that when he invited people to his home to eat, and after they were done eating, he said, now we have to say thank you. So they thought that he meant to say thank you to Abraham and to Sarah who prepared the meal, which certainly is true. But he said, no, we have to say thank you to the Lord that has given us our bread, that has given us life. By inviting people in your home and giving them a meal, then you can talk to them about God. If you're just going to stand up and holler about God and not do anything for human beings, it's going to be very hard to reach people, very hard to convince people of anything. On the other hand, we shouldn't think of Abraham as a softy, as, Mr. Nice Guy. There are nerds in the world, and therefore that's why he's such a nice person. That's not true. We see he goes to war when he has to go to war. He's strong when he has to be strong. He's even, so to speak, cruel when he has to be cruel, as when he takes his son Isaac and is willing to sacrifice him in order to fulfill the commandment of God. And the Lord stops him to illustrate that human sacrifice is not necessary. But Abraham is a man of steel. And for him to be such a nice person, quote unquote, it's, so to speak, an extension of one's character to be able at one and the same time be a strong person and a compassionate person. And Abraham set the example. He created this idea of how to treat human beings and how to see God through the treatment of those human beings. And that's why he is the father of all of the major monotheistic religions. He's the father of the Jewish people. In fact, that's the name that we call him, Avraham Avinu, Abraham our father, because of the fact that he remains the main prototype of what Judaism hopes to produce. Now, Abraham was not the first monotheist in the world. Noah was a monotheist. Shem was a monotheist. Aver was a monotheist. There were many, many generations before him. But no one was able to spread the message. No one was able to create a family, a tribe, a nation that would believe and live according to those precepts. That Abraham was able to do. And our rabbis teach us, the Meir, he says it a number of places, that half the world was convinced by Abraham at the time of his life. And we see in the Chumash, we see in the Torah, that Abraham is complimented. Nasi Elokim ato b'tocheinu. You're the Prince of God in our midst. Well, if anybody that can be seen by the world as being a Prince of God is certainly worthy of our respect and our emulation.
Not as far as I know.
Many people say that Christopher Columbus could have been Jewish himself, but with a name like Christopher, I mean, you know, that's really having a laugh in itself.
I don't think he was Jewish, but I think I heard that a lot of his crew members were Jewish, as sailors and things like that.
I believe Christopher Columbus was a Jew living in Spain.
That's what they say his mom was, so usually that means he is.
They say, this I'm not 100% sure, but they say that Columbus's navigator was a Jew.
This is one of the trick questions in Jewish history. Was Christopher Columbus Jewish? What we do know about Christopher Columbus is that he came from a family that originally was Jewish. In 1391, there were great pogroms throughout Spain, and many of the Jews were forced to convert to Christianity because of the threat of being killed. Columbus's family, which originally was Jewish, became Christian and moved to Italy, lived in Genoa, where Columbus was born. Columbus himself was a Christian. However, we do find, and scholars have written many articles and books about the matter, we do find that Columbus had certain Jewish, what shall I say, characteristics. The way he wrote, phrases that he used, all were common to converso Jews who were forced to adopt Christianity on the outside, but attempted to retain some vestige of Judaism on the inside. And Columbus's crew that came to America, that discovered the new continent, there were Jews, there were crypto-Jews, and there were real Jews that were on board. And therefore, this tantalizing mystery has always existed, was Columbus Jewish or not? I think that's what's more important is the fact that Columbus's expedition to the New World was financed by Jews. Abraham Senior and other Jewish financiers in Spain were the ones that put up the money for the exploration. And two, the fact that the exploration mission, the boats left just at the very same time that the expulsion of the Jews from Spain occurred in August of 1492. And therefore, Columbus's role in discovering the New World, which would provide such a wonderful haven for Jews centuries later, is tied inextricably to Jewish history, to one of the saddest chapters in Jewish life, which is that of the expulsion from Spain. So Columbus has a role in Jewish history, even if he himself could not under any circumstances be considered to be Jewish either in halachic or in the social fashion. But nevertheless, he has Jewish attachments, which make the question so poignant, and why it hasn't gone off the table, so to speak, for many centuries.
As far as like not being able to marry one wife anymore, I don't know what they were thinking when they stopped that, because it seems to be an all-around good idea. God's cool with it, I'm cool with it, and like I don't know what the rabbis were thinking in the slightest.
The reason why they must have stopped marrying more than one wife is because they probably were killing each other or getting jealous of each other, and therefore they just felt it'd be better for everyone to stop it.
I think what happened was men got greedy and got a little things out of hand, and it was time to put an end to having lots of wives.
It's been pretty recently, I'm not sure exactly when, and I think the reason for it is because even though according to the Torah it's allowed to marry more than one wife, in the world, it became accepted that people marry one person, and in order that the Jews shouldn't look immoral, they made that restriction.
In the Bible, men used to marry more than one wife, but right now, I don't see any reason why we need to have more than one wife. I think you can get what you need to out of life with just one wife.
I don't think anyone can handle more than half a wife, you know, and with one whole one, you got your hands full. Another 18 is not going to do you any better in fulfilling your goal in this world and in your life.
I think it might be a good idea for Jews to marry more than one wife, but that's from a very selfish point of view. As for marrying only one wife, that's also good because you'll have a more intimate relationship with her if she's the only one.
Polygamy was never a mainstream idea in Jewish life. Even at a time when polygamy was permitted and practiced, very few Jewish homes were based on polygamy. And most of the time when polygamy was practiced, it was simply because of the fact that there were women who could not be left alone in a very dangerous and anti-feminine society, and therefore needed to be part of a home, a part of a family. And therefore, many times a man would take a second wife as much out of compassion for the woman as out of his own personal needs. The rabbis always said that 2 women in the kitchen is problems, and 2 women in other rooms in the house is certainly problems. So therefore, it never was encouraged. However, in the 11th century, Rabbi Gershom, the Light of the Exile, who was really one of the founders of Ashkenazic Jewry, at a convocation of rabbis, passed a law, so to speak, a decree that banned polygamy entirely. Part of the problem was that living in the Christian society, which even looked at askance at marriage at one wife and held that celibacy was the height of purity, 2 wives looked like immorality. And partly because of the pressures, the economic and other pressures of the exile, the ban was widely accepted. And from that time on, Ashkenazic Jewry banned polygamy, almost under all circumstances. Now, Sephardic Jewry, the Jews who lived in the Muslim countries, did not adopt Rabbeinu Gershom's policy, and polygamy existed there really until almost our time, till the middle of the 20th century. However, there also it was not the norm, not the mainstream, and almost in all cases there were extenuating circumstances that contributed to the fact that there was a polygamous house. And by 1950, when the Sephardic Jews began their emigration to the land of Israel, in the land of Israel polygamy was banned for everyone, so those who came with more than one wife naturally could keep them. But there were no more polygamous marriages, so that today within the Jewish people it's practically unknown that there should be any polygamous houses whatsoever, and the sanctity of the Jewish home is maintained through monogamous, faithful, loyal relationships.
The Hasidim have been around for, I would think, 3,000 years, 2,000 years.
The first chassid was the Baal Shem Tov. I'd have to say he went back a good, at least 500 years. I'm thinking, you know, I'm hearing from the audience that it might be closer to about 200 years, maybe 100 and a lot of change, closer to 200.
800 years, like, I would say 600 years?
200 something years ago.
I think they've been around for about 300 years.
Ever since I've been in Israel, I've seen some, so That's as far as I can tell you, maybe a year and a half or two.
I'm not sure what to think so much about Hasidim. I mean, like, a lot of them don't speak English, and Me'asharim, they only speak Yiddish, and I don't. But the ones I've met are, like, pretty nice guys, I guess, like that. If they want to grow them, like, paya thingies or whatever, then, like, whatever floats their boat. I've seen weirder hairstyles, like, on Ben Yehuda Street or in America, so whatever, you know?
The Hasidic movement began at the beginning of the 18th century in Eastern Europe. Its founder, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, was a charismatic teacher and leader who, even though he lived a relatively short life, he died in his 50s, had enormous influence on his disciples, who spread the message of Hasidus throughout Eastern Europe. Eventually, almost all Polish Jewry, Galician Jewry, Ukrainian Jewry became Hasidic, penetrated into Central Europe, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania. And the Hasidic movement is a revolution, so to speak, because in the 18th century when it began, the old forms of study and of Jewish social life began to break down. You had the beginning of all sorts of changes in the general world, new ideas, the Enlightenment, ideas of urbanization and industrialization came into the world. The Hasidic movement came to, not to counter these ideas as much as to provide an alternative to the ideas, to create a spiritual world where Jews could live. And especially because of the great persecution of the Jews under the Tsars, as the situation became worse and worse, poverty, infant mortality, pogroms, the Hasidic movement provided an escape into a world of the spirit, into a world that was much more comforting, had greater vision, less pressures. It's an interesting thing that the Hasidim eventually said that this world that we live in is not the real world, but that there is a real world where all of these injustices, all of this violence, all of this hatred really doesn't exist. And Chassidus is a very complicated thing. It's been oversimplified to say it's a movement of joy. Yes, it is. It's a movement of song. Yes, it is. It's a movement of prayer. Yes, it is. It's a movement for the masses. Yes, it is. But it's much more than that. And it's very, very complex and complicated, and it's divided into many, many different groups, subsections, subgroupings. I think there are hundreds of different Hasidic sects. Because of that, it doesn't lend itself to easy interpretation or to a view of it as being monolithic. But it is the major revolution in Jewish life, certainly over the last 3 centuries. And what makes it unique is that it is a revolution within the boundaries of Jewish tradition and halakha, whereas other attempts to change and reform the Jewish people always went outside the box of halakha and tradition and attempted to create a new Judaism. Whereas Chassidus didn't create a new Judaism, but it did try to create new Jews, which is a little harder than creating a new Judaism.
The Messiah is a very old man with a very long white beard who will come all dressed in white and barefoot but will be numb to pain, and he will have a big brown walking stick, bright blue eyes, very long uncombed hair, and will tell everybody the end of days is now.
If you ask like any amount of people, they'll tell you a whole bunch of different stuff about the whole thing with the Messiah, but like my own personal thing is just like when like the Messiah comes, like that's when like people are finally gonna like be smart about like what matters and what doesn't.
The Messiah is a man, a regular human being, born in blood, that when he comes, it will be the time when the whole world will unite, when there will be peace on earth.
To me, the Messiah is a person that is going to come and basically take care of all the problems of the Jews.
The Jewish idea of the Messiah is a human being who will arise and will complete the redemption of the Jewish people, the restoration of the land of Israel to the Jewish people. Will be able to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, naturally, and will serve as a beacon of light for all mankind, so that the whole world will benefit from his special leadership. But I think it has to be emphasized that what makes Judaism unique is that we see in the Messiah a human being. We don't see him as a superhuman being. In fact, Maimonides posits that the Messiah will himself die, and that he'll be succeeded by his son or by his successor that will rule after him. So the Messiah is like the great leader who can bring us into a better world, into a more utopian society, into a world where peace will reign. But the Messianic era, there are different views of it in Jewish life. The Maimonidean view, for instance, is a very bland Messianic era, where nothing supernatural will take place. Maimonides interprets all the verses in the Bible that refer to the Messianic era, the lion will lie down with the lamb, etc. The Rambam interprets all of that as being allegorical, not to be taken literally. It just means that small nations will be able to live without being afraid of greater nations, of greater powers. Violence and war will be diminished. It'll be an economy that will make it much easier for people to make a living. But gold is not going to rain down from heaven, and nor are we going to be able to pick dollar bills off of trees. The second view, and this view has gained much more credence in Jewish life because of the length of the exile, and because of the tremendous price that the Jewish people have paid for survival throughout the ages. Second view doesn't accept such a bland Messianic era, and it sees in it, therefore, supernatural things that will occur. It sees in it that the time of the Messiah will also bring about the resurrection of the dead. It builds a much more exalted world where nature, as we know it today, will undergo changes. And therefore, it is conceivable that all of the verses will be taken literally, and that the utopian era will be ushered in immediately, and in this utopian era, death and war and violence and competition, all of that will disappear, and it will be the Messianic world, a Garden of Eden in this world itself. These two views still exist within the Jewish people, but as I said, as the prices become more expensive, it's much more difficult to sell a bland and natural Messianic era. The tendency is to look to it to be the supernatural.